My guest today is a rock and roller, and I don't know if he knows about the Marzio pickups. Hopefully he
Of
does
course.
because he has a podcast. Well, and it's called Let There Be Talk. And my guest today is someone who I've met before. Actually, I was on his podcast years ago. He just reminded me that he was visiting me in my apartment on the Upper West Side, which really is crazy because I'd like to think that dementia has not rolled in yet. But, according to my wife, I do have it. And, so let me welcome a comedian, actor, rock and roller, heavy duty rock and roller, really a man who has it in his soul. As a perfect example of that is the title of his podcast, which is an ode to AC/DC, one of the greatest bands on the planet Earth, Dean DeLRay. Hey, Dean, how you doing, bud?
Hey, buddy, how's it going? Yeah, it's funny is I find that, I've done over almost 800 episodes, 12 years now. I've been podcasting. And even Paul Stanley was episode 500. And I saw him about 2 months later backstage at the Forum. And I was like, or a Staples Center. And I go, hey, Paul, it's Dean. You did my podcast a couple months ago. And he was all, oh, oh, yeah, cool. Like he didn't even remember because, that guy's probably done 1 billion interviews, actually 1 billion,
Yeah, it's hard. I always say, hey man, remember me at that gig in Missouri when you handed me that pick back in 1984? And I go, no.
Yeah. Yeah. I just
Yeah.
remind him right away because I really don't remember anything since probably 2003. Whenever the phone came in strong, the memories are gone. I just did a year and a half on the road with Bill Burr. We've done every arena in America, and I remember 5 of them: the Garden, the Forum, Red Rocks, the Greek in Berkeley, and the Hollywood Bowl. And the rest is just the blur, man, until you go there again and you walk into the hotel or the venue and you go, oh, yeah, I know this place. This is over there. The catering's over there.
Yeah, or I know where the bathroom is now. Like
Right.
we would
Yeah.
hit the arena so often, I'd go, wow, I really do remember where the bathroom is. I do remember where the stage door, whatever. That's when you've been doing this for a very, very long time all over the place.
It's funny because I really love Twisted Sister. So when I had you on, it was a great thrill because I had seen you guys so many times. I'm 58. I saw you guys since the beginning of your recording days, not the early East Coast shit. That documentary was fantastic. And I feel like that documentary really resonates with me to this day because the amount of times I've been told no because of my age is unbelievable. And I just keep going and keep going. It's like, no, no. And it's like Madison Square Garden, no, no, the Hollywood Bowl. And that Stay Hungry song gets played weekly around my crib just to keep rolling.
And our theme song, It's a Long Way to the Top if you want to rock and roll. I mean, we certainly have enough anthems in Twisted Sister, but I don't think anything says it better than that AC/DC song. In fact, every time I hear it, because it was our intro song for so many years, that if I'm in a mall or if I'm just out and I hear it, my blood pressure starts to rise because, oh my God, I've got to be on stage in 3 minutes. But the message of that song is so damn true. For the real good ones, for the good ones,
Yeah.
the good ones, it's a long way to the top.
It's funny because, AC/DC, they did my podcast, the only podcast they've ever done. And I've seen them since 1978. And it's funny when you look at an anthem song, let's say Let There Be Rock or For Those About to Rock. On paper, you would think, that's cheesy as shit. Like if I was a singer for 25 years. So I would never think of writing something like that because you're like, this is corny. But then when it's sang with conviction and you really believe it, you're like, oh, wow, this is great.
Well, you could say that about I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. Same
Totally.
thing. It sounds trite. And you know, Dee's songs, I'll Never Grow Up Now, Bad Boys of Rock and Roll, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, one could say on paper, it sounds like a cheesy kid's thing, but when you are presenting it like you mean it because you lived it, it's
Yeah.
a whole other thing.
Especially those about to rock, man, because it's just like stand up and be counted, you know, you're hearing that. And then by the end, when the cannons come out and everything's fucking firing, you're like, this tune is incredible, man. It's a journey too. The way it's crazy, man. I love
Yeah,
it.
you know, we had the honor of having Brian Johnson come on stage with us and do Whole Lotta Rosie in England. And we hadn't played the song. And this was in around 2006. We did a biker festival in England, and Brian was there. I think he was emceeing it or was just hanging out or whatever. And we hadn't played a whole lot of Rosie since we did it in the bars with AJ. And the last time we did that was like 1980, maybe 81, maybe 82. So when Brian came in, hey laddies, you know, like we already knew Brian because in 1983, when we were first touring England, we were in Newcastle, and Brian came down to our hotel, or he sends a friend of his down and said, Brian invites you over to the house. And we all went over to his house and he fed us for the night, you know, and you know, in those days or in England, when bank holiday Mondays come, everything's shut. So there was no restaurants open. But Brian says, well, I'm Brian Johnson. They'll open for me, you know? So he calls it Indian restaurant and they delivered all this food. Anyway, Brian came on. I have a whole lot of Rosie on, we filmed it. And, man, if that doesn't get your blood going with Brian on stage doing a whole lot of Rosie, you know, the crazy thing was the place went nuts. I mean, it went nuts. Of course, they're all singing Angus, da
Yeah.
da 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 da,
Yeah.
Angus, da 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 da. And you got like 20,000 kids, and we blast through the song, and it was the last song of the set. We walked off stage, and Brian says this to me. He goes, JJ, that's the best reaction I've ever heard in my life. And I looked at Brian. I said, Brian, I love you. You're wonderful, but go fuck yourself. I said, you're AC/DC motherfuckers.
Yeah.
I am sure I said, I have screamed loud at AC/DC
Yeah.
concerts.
Yeah.
I said, he's a wonderful human being. He's a wonderful guy.
He's
Just a
amazing,
wonderful
man.
guy.
He's amazing. You know, when I was a kid, I passed a demo off to somebody of my band, and the guy got it to Brian. And this is back in the payphone days and home call, you know, home phones and shit. But he called, he's like, hey, my matey, Dean, this is great. Come on out. Let's talk a little. At the time, he was thinking of starting a label. And it was pretty interesting, you know, how cool he was. And it's funny because I just met him by accident on the Fly on the Wall tour. And that's how it all happened. You know, it was just wild.
Well, great guy, great band. One of the few bands, if I was to see them today, I'd still stand through the whole show. And
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't do that for just about anybody else, but I would do it for AC. My wife and I went to see AC/DC a couple of years ago at the Garden, and we stood. And my wife doesn't, you know, her whole thing is, I want to go to a James Taylor concert. You know, that's
Yeah.
what she wants to do. You know, James Taylor, Cat Stevens. She was up the whole 2 hours because their song catalog is so fucking great.
It's insane.
It's insane. You know, if you look at I always had this kind of a theory about the difference between American uh, stars and British stars. And I said, why is it that England gives us great bands, but America gives us great individuals? And let me explain that to you. It's not hard and fast. It's a general statement. One day I'm sitting around going, who's the best bands? Beatles, Stones, Who's Up, Floyd, Queen, AC/DC, Black Sabbath. And I go, whoa, wait a minute. They're all like, none of them are American. And I'm thinking, well, wait, there's got to be an American band in there, right? So I'm thinking, I guess you can say Van Halen, or I guess you can say Metallica, or I guess maybe you can say the Grateful Dead, but it was always, I guess you can say. It wasn't a slam dunk. It was Beatles, Stones, Who's That, Floyd, Queen, AC/DC, Black Sabbath. End of story. Mount Rushmore. Can't argue the fact. So then I go, well, what does America have? Oh, we only have Elvis, Bob Dylan, Sam Cooke, Chuck Berry, Aretha Franklin, Roy Orbison, Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty. Like, we have individuals, not to say
Yeah.
that they don't play with groups, but we have a more of an individual centric world. Do you know, in the general scheme of things? And they have a
Well,
more group centric world over there. Yes, you can find exceptions to the rule. You can say, well, they
yeah.
got Bowie and they got Rod Stewart, but we've got, come on, we've got Johnny Cash, we've got Chuck Berry,
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
got James Brown.
But we also have like Aerosmith, which I think is fucking unbelievable. We have
Uh,
Boston, which I think is unbelievable. I think Boston's totally underrated. We have the Cars, which I think are a fucking genius band. There's bands out there, but I get what you're saying. Absolutely.
yeah,
You
because
know,
these bands that you mentioned, by the way, who I love dearly, love
yeah,
them. No doubt. Aerosmith
I
at
know
one
what you're
point,
saying.
four
Yeah,
albums, their 4 album run they had in the
right.
70s was among the best 4 album run you're ever going to have of any band. But in terms of the sociological worldwide impact, you
Yeah.
cannot look at the Beatles, Stones, Who, Zep, Floyd, Queen, AC/DC, Black Sabbath in any other light than universally revered for A, how long they've been out, B, their amount of catalog, which is astonishing, right?
Insane.
Their relevance and how they changed culture. Like, they
Yeah, of
changed whole cultures. Whereas Aerosmith wouldn't be Aerosmith without the Stones. Let's be fair.
course. Of
Okay.
course.
Let's be fair. All these other groups kind of need. Now, if you're a Deadhead, you can make a case. If you're a Deadhead, you will make a case for the Dead. You
Of
absolutely will.
course.
You'll make a case for them. And I get it. I used to be a Deadhead. I get it. You can make a case. You can make, and the Eagles, you can hate the Eagles. You can't deny the fact that from a recording perspective, their ratio of releases to songs we know is among the highest of any act.
I love the
It's like
Eagles.
you just know them, right?
Yeah,
But I saw the Dead 2 weeks ago at the Sphere.
the best.
By the way, have you
I've
been to the
seen I've
Sphere?
seen Dead and Co like 16 times. I've been to the Sphere. I'm 58. I don't go to concerts anymore unless it's at the Bowl or the Sphere. That's my or Red Rocks. Those are my spots for now on because that Sphere has completely disintegrated the concert industry. The cleanliness, the sound, the screens, the magnitude of everything in there. I went with a handful of mushrooms, right? Because I had seen you two on the Octung Baby tour and I had taken mushrooms. So I go, I'm going, they're playing Octung Baby. I'm going to relive that dream. I whip out the handful of mushrooms. They come on, they open up with Zooropa, right? And I'm about to take them. And then I go, oh, I don't even need these because this is what these are supposed to take me to. And I'm already there. So I put them back in my pocket. It's
You know,
insane.
it's insane. It has ruined it for everything else. It's just
Yeah.
pretty much ruined it. I have to say this about watching the Grateful Dead. I go back to 1968 with the Grateful Dead. So I
Killer.
saw them, I don't know, like 28 times from 68 to 72. So I saw them with Pigpen. Okay. The Dead obviously ushered in the world of the light show,
Yeah.
which was the first attempt at multi-dimensional sound and light performances. And now they've lasted long enough to get to the Sphere. And the Sphere, I'm telling you, people, you can't oversell this shit. You cannot
No,
overhype it. You cannot oversell it. It is the most mind-blowing experience. It's like going to an IMAX and a planetarium on 10 doses of acid without the without
yeah.
the
And I'll tell you something right now. I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area, so I hated the Dead. Okay, because I was a Metallica guy. I was full rock and all of that. And then somewhere along the line, later on in life, I became a big fan of the Working Man's Dead because I was way into roots rock and alt country, Wilco, Sunvolt, all of that stuff. Lucinda Williams, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, all these great records. So I start listening to the Dead, then still not way into it. Then I go to the last two Dead shows that Fare Thee Well with Trey on guitar. And I'm like, this is cool. But then I go see Dead and Co. with John Mayer. And at the time, I had started becoming friends with John over him seeing me at the Comedy Store in the Comedy Cellar, and we became friends. And he was a guy that I couldn't stand growing up because I was jealous over him because I was playing roots rock, and I was like, this guy's just good looking, and that's why people like him. But that was just my own insecurities and my jealousy, like an idiot. Later, I fell in love with this record he made called Born and Raised, which I feel is a masterpiece. So I go see Dead and Co., and I'm fucking floored. And I've been seeing him ever since. And I love everything about him except for the tempos. But Jay, the new drummer, has seemed to have brought up the tempos. But holy shit, does John Mayer smoke that, man?
Yeah, Mayer has actually figured out a way to channel Jerry, but improve on
Oh yeah,
Jerry because
yeah.
Jerry, and I saw Jerry a lot, and I've said it in interviews, so I'm going to say it out. He's not my favorite guitar player. I came out of an era in 1969 of Clapton, Beck, Page, Alvin Lee, those kinds of British blues rockers. That was my sound. So Jerry was never my sound, but I was always aware of what Jerry's unique tone was,
Oh
but I
yeah.
also thought he noodled around too much. Like he played scales over and over, and I got kind of bored with the scales. Mayer is a better guitar player. And Mayer will probably say, "No, I'm not."
Yeah, he's not going to say that.
He's
Yeah,
never
but
going to say it, so I can say it.
right.
John, you don't have to say it. I will tell you. You make the Dead more interesting because you're a better player. And because your soloing is so good, it takes you from point A to point B rather than Garcia just kind of like meandering around the fretboard. That's just my opinion of it.
Also, his singing is next level on stuff like Terrapin Station, Althea, the soul and the groove on it. And what's really interesting, if you study Dead and Co. and John like I did, it's almost the exact type of thing with Jerry. When you first see John, he's got, a custom Paul Reed Smith that was made for him that has a bunch of switches like Jerry's, semi hollow body F holes. He's out there with Paul Reed Smith amps. He's wearing some kooky outfits and stuff. And just like Jerry, when Jerry starts, he's like SG and Fender amps. And then a next wave, Jerry's like the Strat, the Gator Strat, and he's playing some tweed, Fenders. My point is, every year, Mayer was evolving his sound, his vibe, his comfort, and everything in Dead and Co. Like Jerry towards the end with his Olympics and his Mutron sound, bum, 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 bum. And now, if you look at John, he's playing his own version of his Strat from Paul Reed. He's playing through the Dumbles, and he's completely comfortable in just a t-shirt and jeans and a watch, and killing.
Yeah, he's killing it. I'm going to really do something as creative as I possibly can be, which is I'm going to drop an ad in the middle of this conversation because I think this ad is legitimate.
Yeah.
And it is DiMarzio. DiMarzio has been my pickup since 1977. They were the first company to make a super distortion pickup. They were the first company to recognize that an aftermarket pickup was something. Young guitar players have no idea that you could not buy a humbucking pickup back up until 1977. It did not exist. You had to buy a Gibson if you could find one. They weren't available usually as a solo product. Larry DiMarzio is an old friend of mine. Worked with a bunch of people in New York City on 48th Street and had a long cred in 48th and developed the DiMarzio pickup, of which the Super Distortion was the first one. And for those of you who see my guitars videos that you see, and Eddie Ojada's as well, we're playing humbucking pickups because those are the pickups we threw in our guitars back in the day. And of course, Larry has a million different versions of humbuckings now. But if you listen to and are fans of Van Halen and Kiss, Def Leppard, Steve Vai, Twisted Sister, I mean, just about every single band, Nirvana, used the DiMarzio version of humbucking pickups. I'm sure you have them in yours, or you have used them, or you've definitely heard DiMarzio's. And Larry said to me, I said to Larry, I'd love you to be an advertiser. And he said, love to have it. And I said, but you know what? It's not going to be a bullshit ad. I use the shit. I use them.
Yeah. It's funny about Larry. when you think about back in the 70s, Larry is a lot like Randall Smith, who was the owner and creator of Boogie. These guys were the original boutique companies, you know? I mean, later we had Matchless and we had, you know, Top Hat and all these amps. But early on, you know, the humbucker, that really spawned into EMG's Invader, which what Metallica used. And people were just, you know, pounding on to that. So it's wild to think of these innovators back then, just some old fucking, you know, techie, not techie, but gear nerds that were like, well, I need some humbuckers, you know. It's like, well, you got to buy a Les Paul and pull them out of there, you know, if you want to throw it into your Strat like Eddie Van Halen. It's pretty wild, man. The innovators are mind-boggling back
You
then.
know what else too, which was crazy to think about back in the day. So like I'd say 71, 72, 73. If you wanted humbuckings with cream rims because you saw pictures of 59 bursts with cream rims, you could not buy cream rims. They did not exist. I had to buy black ones and spray paint them with cream enamel to
Wow.
put them on my guitar. My mother would come in the room and be she goes, "Are you smoking weed and covering it up?" I said, "No, I'm painting the rims of my guitar pickups because you could not buy them." So Larry pioneered the cream color, because even though we know that they were coiled different colors because they ran out of the pigment back in the day, no one knew that that was why it was. Larry came up with the cream rims. So I just want to say that if you want to buy any one of the DiMarzio pickups and you will do it online through DiMarzio.com and you use discount code JJF, just the letters JJF 2024, you get a discount. So if you want to buy humbuckings, or if you want to buy Larry DiMarzio pickups and Telly pickups, anything, Strat, he makes them all. Use the code JJF 2024. And this comes from someone who actually uses it and still uses the product. So I'm glad that we gave him his acknowledgement, because you're right. These are the guys that came before the Soldanos and they came before the Duncans. I mean, all due respect to all these people, they're fine products.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, great. You know, I
Yep.
mean, Matchless, Mark Sampson is one of the greatest amp makers of all time. Same with Dumble. Um, but you know, early on, Randall with the boogie, and then you get the right DiMarzio super distortion pickup, and you're on your way. Because my first guitar was that Gibson the SG, the walnut cheap one. And I went and bought an amp, and you know, I saw the Stones, the 75, they're using those amp pegs. And I was like,
The SVTs, the
yeah,
really big ones.
yeah. And I was like, I need an amp peg. And the guy goes, here, and he sold me one with a 15. It was a bass amp, and he lied to me. So whenever I plug in, it was just like clink, clink, clink. And then that, you know, MXR distortion plus pickup pedal came out, the yellow one, and then the DiMarzios, and you were on your way. You finally could get a sound like your heroes.
You know what? I'll tell a story that many people don't know. As you point out, there's a lot of boutique amplifier companies, right? A lot of them. And
Yeah.
as we all know, they all want to be like Marshall. Like Marshall was in the beginning, even though Jim Marshall will tell you he took the circuit from a Fender Bassman amplifier to make a Marshall amp. The point is, Marshall became the standard, especially with all the artists that you and I love. Everyone had to have a Marshall
Of
amp, right?
course.
Everyone had a Marshalls. So back in the day when we were playing in the bars in Long Island, Marshall's distributor was Korg,
Yep.
and Korg was based on Long Island. And we blew up a couple of Marshall heads, and we looked in the instruction booklet, and there it said, Marshall. I forgot what town it was in Long Island. So we drove out there. We drove, and it was like a part of Long Island where it was just nothing but warehouses, that kind of a place, is that kind of section of the island where it's just nothing but deliveries companies. And we knock on the door of Korg Electronics, and Mitch Colby opens the door, and hi, we're Twisted Sister, we're a local band. We have these Marshalls that are blown up. And he says, you know what? It's good that you came here, because we got a couple of guys here who are tinkering around with the Marshalls. They're brothers, Kenny and Tony Frank, and they'll talk to you and they'll soup up your Marshalls. And we're like, souped up Marshalls. Remember, this is before any
Of
boutique stuff.
course.
right?
Yep.
So they come out and they go, guys, we got to come out and see you. So they come and see us. And they go, whoa, we're playing three 100-watt heads in a bar,
Ah,
three
yeah.
cabinets each, three 100-watt heads ganged up together. And they said, you got EL34s in there. And we're gonna do something better for you. We're gonna strip out the tube sockets. We're gonna put 6550s in, and
Whoa.
you're gonna rub the voltage up higher. And I said, well, what's the good? The good news is it's gonna be louder and heavier. The bad news is you're gonna burn out tubes faster. But you just come to us. You come to us, and we'll do it. So we had, from what I believe now, after reading a recent interview with Mitch Colby in a magazine called Tone Quest, which is another advertiser for me, but that wasn't necessarily made to push that, but I will. He talked about Korg, talked about the Franks brothers, and said they may have been um, the first techies to get in there to super hot rod a Marshall. And we all know everybody was going after super hot rodded Marshalls at some point. Everyone had a Rivera, a
Yep.
VHD. It was always a super hot rodded Marshall. So Twisted may have had the very first hot rodded Marshall amplifiers. And I'm proud to say that because, our legacy goes back that far. And the
I'll
stuff
tell
was
you,
great.
I don't know if you know this, but I do a Bon Scott tribute once a year in Los Angeles. And I've been doing it for 40 something years. So basically what it is me, Bill Burr, we come out, we do comedy for about an hour. I go on, then he goes on, then we take a 30-minute break, and then I come out and we do a 2-hour Bon Scott concert. I sing the whole show, and then I bring in different guitar players, like Lur from Primus, different drummers, Brad from Rage, Scott Ian from Anthrax, Nikki Sixx has played it, George Lynch has played it, Steve Gorman, drummer for Black Crowes. Anyway, so every year, I only do it once a year now. I have not played music since I started comedy 15 years ago. And when we rehearse, I can't even fucking believe that I used to sit in a small little box to rehearse back in the 80s with Marshall stacks. And we're playing like Michael Schenker Group, Armed and Ready, you know, and just sitting there singing, no problem. Cause now it's like, what the fuck? You can't even believe how loud a 100-watt Marshall is. It is unreal, the volume that comes off of that. And we all still are standing. It's crazy. My hearing is fried, but I can't believe the magnitude of it. When a guy hits it, you just go like, what the fuck, dude?
Could you imagine though? Dean, can you imagine we were using three 100-watt heads
Unreal.
into three 4x12 boxes on each side of the stage? They had the two cabinets on top of each other and then a half a cabinet with the three heads stacked on top of that. That was our stage volume in
At
the
a bar.
bars, man.
Yeah.
In a bar.
And the
In a
people are
bar.
up front just going, yeah, louder. And poor D, because I'm the singer for all these years, you got these two shit fucking monitors in front of you, and you're looking over at the guy and he's smoking a joint, flirting with some chick, and you're like, dude, give me some goddamn fucking. And he's like, that's all I got. See ya. And you're like, what? So now, at least with in-ears, thank God you can control it. Like I'm turning all you guys down.
I had tinnitus for many years in the band because I never wore plugs. So in the
Right.
first, 15 years of the band, none. And I had really bad tinnitus. And one afternoon I was walking down Broadway. I'll never forget this. And all of a sudden my ears popped and I got my hearing back. And it was
Wow.
like 3 years after we stopped playing. And then my problem is that when the band got back together in 2003, I did not wear plugs
Oh, no.
because I got my hearing back. And now, now all the jokes with my wife, my wife, like my wife says, one day she goes, "You've got dementia or Alzheimer's."
Yeah.
You're not, she goes, which is definitely things. You have dementia or Alzheimer's. You're not paying any attention to me. You can't hear anything, and I,
That's called married.
so it's called marriage, right?
Yeah.
So I go to an audiologist, and the audiologist says, gives me a test. It goes, Mr. French, considering your age and occupation, your hearing isn't all that bad, but I'm going to send, my my regular GP said, you don't have Alzheimer's dementia because if I show you a set of car keys and you tell me they're car keys, you don't have dementia. If you tell me you don't know what they are, I'll
Right.
send you to NYU. He says, but so the audiologist says the good news and bad news is your hearing isn't as bad as you think it is, except the bad news is you're not paying any attention to your wife. And then
Yeah.
the joke, of course, is that 90% of the marriage is saying what from another room. And
Yeah.
I say to my wife, if you need to talk to me and tell me something that you want me to remember, you have to come in. You have to look at me
Yeah.
and you have to tell it to me or ask me to come in and watch you as you tell it to me. Because otherwise, it kind of just goes. Are you married?
No, never been married, no kids, single, fully winning, you know?
So you don't deal with that side of things, and
Well,
it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating. I mean, I feel bad because women speak. This is also going to sound like a joke, but we're the cycles that women speak at are just at the same spot that we lose our hearing. So you
yeah.
could say there was intelligent design involved in all this. No, you could say that somehow there was a cosmic thing, but men. Can you hear a guy talk and not a woman talk? No kidding, like not a joke. When men talk, you tend to hear their voices. They speak at a lower register.
Yeah.
Women speak at a higher register. I tend to not hear it. It's the truth.
Well, also there's a disease in America called bad audio mixes now, especially at films. When I go to the movie theater, they're like, well, your hearing's really fried. I'm like, no, it's the mix they're doing now. Because if the theater doesn't have the fucking, 7.5 fucking system or whatever they're mixing it in, you're not getting the audio of the voices. So you're in this movie theater, it's like, and I'm like, I'm not even hearing this fucking film. It's like awful.
Isn't the sound in the sphere absolutely fantastic, by the
Oh,
way?
dude, I saw you too, right? And when they first come on, I'm sitting in my seat. They got a big intro, and the screens open up, and it looks like basically Mad Max, and they go, and when they hit the first two, the whole seat rumbled. And I was like, what? I'm glad it didn't do that the whole show, but it was like, here we go, man. Because I heard each seat has like 10 speakers or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Imagine
yeah.
the repairs on that every month or so. Do they go through there and shoot sound and repair speakers and shit?
All I know is that the concept behind the sound system, because you don't see a sound system, you don't
No,
see anything. You see
no,
nothing. You
nothing.
do know that the whole thing behind the stage is all fake anyway. Everything is on a screen.
Right.
That sound system, when they developed it, they built it into they built it into the Beacon Theater. Do you know about that? Do you know?
No.
Okay, so here's what happened. The guy who spent the money on the Sphere
Yeah,
owns
I know
owns
who he is.
Madison
Yep.
Square Garden. He
Right.
owns Madison Square Garden. He owns the Beacon.
Right.
So what he did was he took the digital signal processing concept from the
Oh, I did the
Sphere
first night of the Beacon of the new sound
with
system.
a
I
new
did the
sound system.
first night.
That's
Oh
the
yeah,
integrated
like
sound
2 years
system.
ago. It was
Yeah,
insane.
insane because you can hear the same mix from every seat.
Yeah, they go, tonight's the first night of the sound system. And I was like, wow. And they told me, yeah, they told me the whole concept.
Yeah.
The thing that blows my mind about the Sphere is basically you go into a meeting, you're the guy that owns the garden, right? And you go into a meeting with some people and they go, okay, here's what we're able to do. You have nowhere to, they built the mini sphere by the Burbank airport. You have nowhere to go and go, oh, there's no reference. Like, okay, we went over here. Let's just build that over here. This is all from the ground up. So they build it for $1 billion, and then it absolutely costs $2 billion because they're $1 billion behind. He sells some of his shares of the garden or whatever to finish it. The trust that he has to have in the people in the technology world. And that technology now really means secretly it was like 5 years old. And I don't know if they shopped it around and people went, nah, that shit's too much. But to have all of this, it wasn't, 6 months ago when it opened. They didn't just throw the sound up. I mean, they've been working on this shit. So it's all been bubbling for years, which is wild.
Tell me about this mini sphere by the Burbank Airport. Is there really a prototype
Yeah,
thing in
yeah.
there?
It's just Google it, mini sphere. And it's so for years I'd get off flights and be like, oh, well, there it is. You could go over there and they were giving you an idea of what it was going to be. It's still there. It's right next to that hotel across from the Burbank Airport. And I, you know, I was just like, yeah, who cares? It's just another concert venue. That's all I kept thinking. And the only reason I really went right away was I love the Octung Baby record. I think it's one of the greatest records ever made of all time. So I'm like, I'm in. And by the time I left that place, I was like, I'm going here all the time, you know?
Wow. Let's talk comedy a bit.
Oh yeah.
Because
I'm
because I
glad you
like
are.
I
I
love
do a lot of
watching.
people's podcasts and they're like, at the end, they go, so you're a comedian now. Huh? And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, dude, 15 years, 6,000 shows.
Yeah. So it's my Walter Mitty to do comedy.
Yeah,
And because I do motivational speaking and keynote speeches, I can weave in my own stuff. And
of
because I get
course.
paid guaranteed, I'm not worried about failing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll throw in my liners like, like Kiss is going to change their four letters from KASS to AARP, that kind of stuff. Here I'll say
Yeah.
like the Rolling Stones fans are so old they don't clap as they're afraid the lights will go on in the arena. Stuff like this, which is like great funny lines. But
Right.
when I watch comedians and I watch having to deliver the lines and deliver it with enough consistency over the course of a minute or 2 minutes or whatever, I'm always impressed. I just think it's an amazing art. So talk to me, A, about how you developed it, number one, and B, what is your concern about the political correctness atmosphere these days? Because it just seems like everyone's being hamstrung by it.
All right. I'll start with the first one. I was always obsessed with comedy, playing music. To me, it was the same thing. You watch SNL, you see John Belushi, and then you see Devo play. You know, I would hang out at the Comedy Store in the 80s. My buddy was a Coke dealer. We would play, say the Roxy or the Whiskey. Then he would walk up. He would sling blow in there in the 80s. We would watch the ground floor of people like Kinnison and Dice and actually watch the early days of that. And I was blown away. And a lot of rock and rollers hung out at the Comedy Store. It was, they go hand in hand. You put on an AC/DC record at a party in the 70s, then you'd throw on a Richard Pryor record. They were the same. They were outlaws, just like the rock and rollers that we loved. So I
By the way,
always,
situated right next to the Hyatt House. Let's put it that way.
right
Right
there,
next to it. The Riot House was next door. So it's a perfect synergy right there.
which, by the way, one of the comedians in the 70s jumped off the Hyatt House to commit suicide and tried to reach the Comedy Store, but you could never jump that far and died there. So, wild story. If you haven't read Dying Up Here, the Comedy Store book, you can get it on eBay for maybe $5. It's one of the great, great reads of comedy history, which is amazing because it runs you through the 70s, Jay Leno, Letterman, all of the big bigs, Richard Pryor at the
Joan
strike.
Rivers, I'm sure. Just
Yeah,
right.
the
Everyone
strike
just
of the comedians. They struck because they wanted to get paid more. It's a really great read, and it's a history of comedy. The Comedy Store is the greatest comedy club in America, hands down. I don't care what anybody says. It is the mecca, 52 years now, I believe, of all of the fucking superstars. All of them. That's where they were. And
more
still,
than Caroline's in New York, even. Would you
no,
say it?
no, wait, no. The
Okay.
it goes Comedy Store and the Comedy Cellar. Those are the two, but it's really the store, and there's nothing like it.